Really, I think that for buyers going into 2025, before rates drop, I really think it's just about making as many offers as you can to find the best deal possible, because you never know how much somebody's going to come off. You never know if they are in a situation where they might sell it for less than they pay for it.
Sellers are looking at their empty calendars right now, and they're probably saying, oh, rates aren't coming down with the presidential change. They don't know what's going to happen after the election. There's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Short Term Show. We are at the end of the year in 2024. And I'm going to be honest with you, this has been a very rough year for the real estate market statistically. And I've mentioned this several times on past episodes, so sorry if you're tired of hearing it. The worst real estate market in the past 65 years in terms of number of homes sold. So more homes were sold in the Great Recession, more homes were sold in the .com bubble burst or whatever the hell that was. So anyway, rough year in real estate. And I have 4 of the top real estate agents in the country here to discuss this. And we're going to discuss a number of things, but we're going to talk about what we've seen this year for short-term rental investors in the real estate market, as well as like what top short-term rental agents are looking for you when you are a short-term rental investor. So we'll go ahead and introduce everybody. First, we'll start off with January Johnson. January, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hello, January Johnson. I say everything between the colas, between Pensacola and Apalachicola, but I cover the Emerald and Forgotten Coast. I've been an agent for 8 years, 3 with the short-term shop.
All right. Next, we have Pete Apizzato. Pete, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. How you doing? I'm Pete Apizzato. I'm also in the Emerald Coast. I'm from mainly Destin to Panama City Beach, but I cover kind of the whole area. Been on the team for about over 3 years. Been selling real estate for probably 6. Got into short-term rentals in 2010.
It doesn't seem like you've been on the team that long, but I guess it has been 3 years.
Yeah, right before me.
Time flies.
And next, Jonathan Lazzarino.
Hey, everybody. Jonathan here with the Short Term Shop. Obviously, I cover the Alabama Gulf Coast, so Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, and Fort Morgan. And excited to talk to everybody today. And
last but not least, Wade.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much. My name is Wade. I'm up in the Smoky Mountain market. I've been on the team for just over 3 years and been in real estate for 5. So super excited to be a part of this.
Yeah. So Wade, you've actually covered 2 markets for us. So you were in the Orlando market, but then your fiance is going to school in Knoxville. So now in the Smoky Mountain market. So you can add a little bit of extra double market color to this conversation.
Yeah. So I own in 3 markets actually. So kind of all over the place.
Well, good. So guys, we've got a good crew here and we're just going to kind of talk shop about real estate. So hopefully you find it interesting and are able to take something away from this conversation that you can use to your benefit in 2025. So I think a lot of us want to hear, what's it been like? What's the market been like this year? Because it has been, and also, sorry, listeners, I'm going to jump forward real quick. The episode that's going to air after this, I'm interviewing an economist on the housing market in about 3 hours. So we're going to compare. It'll be interesting to hear what the agents have to say now versus what the economic data says later. So you'll be able to hear that back to back. That will air the week after this episode. So anyway, let's hear, guys, what has been your experience with the real estate market this year? Both, let's talk about on the buying side first, and then we'll talk about on the listing side. So what's been your experience for your clients this year?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think rates kind of played a part, especially earlier in the year. So I saw activity a little bit slower, and then I saw a pretty quick pickup from middle to the end of the year.
Have any of you seen have you been able to negotiate big price drops, or have you seen a lot of price drops, properties sitting on the market, or are sellers kind of still not understanding that it's not 2021 anymore?
It's totally a buyer's market. I have, in the past 2 months, I have closed on 3 deals that we got for less than the people paid for it. So one of them was like $175,000 under. Now this was a $1.55 million purchase. It wasn't a $300,000 purchase. And it still, it still makes me cringe a little bit when buyers want to put in super low ball offers, but I've been surprised. I mean, I guide people property by property, but I'm having a great year in real estate. I don't know anybody else, but I'm going to end the year like 80% better than I did last year for sales. But that's buyer activity. It's different on the listing side, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah. And I think if you can get buyers to get comfortable with just throwing out a bunch of offers, then you eventually do find those properties that you can negotiate a big discount on. And I think all of us as agents do have a little bit of PTSD from 2021 about putting out low offers. Like, I'm happy to do it. All of our team does it. But there was a time when we would get our asses verbally beat by listing agents for throwing out those kinds of offers in 2021 when everything was going for like 200,000 over. So I personally am glad to get away from that kind of market. I like this kind of market better for clients because we're able to actually like get good deals for people and really help them, start their investing journey off on a good foot. I recently, 3 weeks ago, did the same thing. Like, I offered 100,000 under on a 600, and I'm sorry if now I'm going to make clients do that too, and we're going to have to put out a bunch of offers, but that's what we're here for. $100,000 under on 2 different $600,000 properties that I couldn't decide between, and to see who would give me the best deal. And one of them came down, and I got it for 75,000 off, and so that's a lot off on a $600,000 property. So it really, I think that for buyers going into 2025, before rates drop, I really think it's just about making as many offers as you can to find the best deal possible, because you never know how much somebody's going to come off. You never know if they are in a situation where they might sell it for less than they pay for. Heck, I'm a super experienced investor, and I've had to sell properties for less than one apartment building that I've talked about on previous episodes for less than I paid for it. Like, it can happen to the best of us.
I would say now is actually probably my buying season. So right now I actually put an offer in on something myself, but homes are usually empty at the end of the year besides Christmas. But, leading into January, February, for most markets, it's market specific, of course, but sellers are looking at their empty calendars right now. And they're probably saying, rates aren't coming down with the presidential change. They don't know what's going to happen after the election. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. And personally, I'm trying to capitalize on that. Just the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, when that's in the market, and if you have some sort of optimistic look leading into next year, especially with rates coming down, whenever that might happen, most homes, though, are probably going to see some increase in demand next year. I'm trying to capitalize on people's calendars right now and capitalize on that uncertainty. So I'm in love with it. January, especially, I know is seeing it too, as she just mentioned. But right now, the next 3 months, especially, would be my little like cove. If I were to carve out a piece and start offering on stuff like I am, it's over the next 3 months probably.
I want to add something to that too, Wade, because this is a great time to be buying. In my market, December, January, February is slow, right? November to basically February. But if you buy and you close in December, for example, you don't have a payment due until February. If you close in January, you don't have a payment due until March. So that can carry you over the slow season, so you can get your property ready, but you don't actually have to make a mortgage payment for, another month after that. So then that puts you in where you're getting bookings, and then March here starts our high season. So that's a benefit that a lot of people don't think about when they're buying property.
Absolutely. Timing the closing date actually can make a difference. Like, if you're meant to close at the end of a month, and if you just push it off a couple of days to the beginning of the month, now you don't have a payment for 60 days. So that one change really just makes a difference to carry you through the slower season.
So you'll also find, I personally have done this on mine, but you'll also find that sometimes vendors will also be a little bit more affordable in the off season right now too, because everyone, when they buy during the high season, spring, summer, sometimes leading into fall, everyone's trying to do their remodeling, catch the good season. But I found that people will usually give me a cheaper price in the off season as well for some work too. So if you're going to be doing any remodeling, capitalize on not owing that mortgage for another 2 months. Shut the home down, do the work that you need to. And if you can get listed before the spring, you're golden for the entire rest of the year. You get a couple reviews, you hit summer market, and you just have a real great year. That's what I've done with 2 of my Airbnbs. And they were actually my best first year. So any of the Airbnbs I own, I tried to hit market before spring. Not saying that you can't buy in the spring and summer, of course, buy when time's right for you. But both of those, my best first years are when I timed right before spring and I had them listed and remodeled before the spring market.
I'm doing that with one of mine right now too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I like to do what I call letting the renters pay for it. So if you need, like I talked to a client yesterday and they were like, I love this house, but it has popcorn ceilings and there's carpet in the bedrooms. Okay. Those are minor fixes. I'd just go ahead and get that up and running. And then in the next shoulder season, just make those changes because those are not super expensive. And it might be something that you're a little squeezed on cash because you're making a big down payment right now and you don't have the extra funds to do the small things, or not small things. I would say those are medium things. But if you don't have the cash, go ahead and just get it rented for a little bit and let the income from those renters pay for those repairs during the next shoulder season.
We can also ask for seller credit at closing too, and that'll keep some cash in your pocket and let you spend that money on whatever else you want. So I always try to max that out, 2% for jumbo and 3% for regular.
You know, on Avery's note, that's one of my favorite things to do. There are creative ways to kind of get the seller to pay for some of the renovations, and if you do it right, like in this market, if you have a house that you can get a pool and 0% finance that right before the spring, then the guests will pay for the pool. You immediately increase your rentability and even your value in this market. It's a beautiful way to do it for very little cash out of pocket.
Mm-hmm. I'm doing a deal like that right now, actually with an agent on the shop in one of my markets. I have an agent right now that's doing that they're getting almost a brand new pool off the credit that we're getting from the seller.
Yeah, these are all really great advice for buyers. So let's switch gears. I think most people listening to this are buyers that are in the boat of possibly buying in the next year. But let's talk about sellers for a minute. So this has been a very difficult year on the listing side of real estate. So what have y'all seen when it comes to listing properties, and what advice would you have for sellers out there who, may have a property listed somewhere and they're not having an easy time of getting it sold?
What I'm seeing here, at least in my experience, if the more unique in the house is or the property, the easier it is to sell in this market. And especially with, I know it sounds crazy, but the higher end Gulf front houses here have been the easiest for me to move and sell. Condos, even if they're priced pretty well, are the toughest and they're the easiest to comp out, because if you look in a complex, you can easily see what the last closed comps have sold for. And if you're not at that price, it's very difficult. People can't just make a buyer buy a property for higher than the last closed comp. So I will say in this market, condos, there's a lot of inventory for condos, a lot of great deals to be had, but they are much more difficult to sell than houses. And the houses have to be priced right too, but the more unique they are, the better.
I've been seeing people lead the market. So those homes that are moving are usually the ones that are pre-pricing in, I would say, the last 3 months worth of sales. They're pre-pricing just under those last 3 months. Because those properties are your most recent comps for what buyer demand is. If you're comparing a 5-bedroom home, for example, to a sale that happened 6 months ago for $30K higher than where the last 3 months worth of sales were, it can be more difficult to get that home sold. And so basically you're just following the market. You're not actually trying to get ahead of the market if it's in a decline. Now, I would say most everything, I don't know if everyone else can here agree on their market. I've kind of seen a flat line where things have kind of just, stalled out. There was a slight decline, I would say, in the Smokies, maybe a little more of a decline in Orlando over the last 12 months. But things have kind of stalled out. I don't know if you guys have seen that in your markets as well over the last 3 months with any buyer demand.
I don't know about stall out, but I think on the listing side anyway, for example, I think really when I have a listing consultation with a potential seller, it's really having to face the tough truth of the market. So data are key to it. It's not pricing it based on this is what I paid, right? And so if that's your tactic going in, those are the ones that typically are going to sit longer if they're not well priced to begin with. Mm-hmm. So it's really, and I can honestly say I've had some tough conversations with my sellers. I tell them all the time, do you want to list the property? Or do you want to sell it? Because if you want to list it, we're going to use your purchase price to price it. That might not get it. And so, if they're willing, and it also depends on their motivation level. If they need to sell, which luckily I feel on our team with our clients, that's not always the situation. It's usually they are moving on to a different investment or something like that. But if their motivation is there and they're realistic, I think you can move the property. Obviously, it can't be just what I find in these markets is the more unique the property is, the quicker they sell. The typical 3 or 4 bedroom box doesn't have much appeal to it. Those are the ones that are sitting.
And can we also talk about pricing relative to income for the property? Because, when I see other agents' listings, not short-term shop, but just in my buyers looking at other listings, and I see this is a rental machine, and it's like $1 million property that the people made, I don't know, 80 grand on last year, and I want to separate look, there's not an inherent number that this house is going to do because it is this house. Obviously, it depends on how you manage it, how much you use it, lots of factors, personal there. Mm-hmm. But what could the property do relative to other successful, enemy method, right? What other successful properties similar to this, what are they doing? And you got to price it relative to that because people are smart. I mean, even people outside the short-term shop are going to ask for income and cost to own. And I'm going to have to defend your income in your property or, cost to own is pretty basic, but if I can't say that you've done a great job at this property, or if I can't explain why you haven't done a great job, then that's going to make it even harder to sell because they are going to ask for that information. And if I'm crazy about it, then now I'm suspect too. So.
Yeah. And sellers, I think that it's really important for you to know that now more than ever, buyers care a lot about the actual rental history. There's only so much we can do in terms of convincing a buyer's agent or a buyer of the property's ability to do better than what you have done. So, if you have really low rental history, like it is difficult. People, again, now more than ever, really want to see strong actuals. I know we all know when it comes to buying properties that it's very subjective. 2 people can own the exact same property and do wildly different numbers, that a property can only do as well as it's managed or as its manager. But it's, it is a buyer's market out there. And when you have really low rental history, lower than it should be, it is harder. Even though it does not affect the appraisal value, it does affect the buyer's sentiment towards your property right now. And one other thing that I wanted to touch on is let's talk about this. Orlando is excluded from this, and Wade, we can talk about Orlando specifically in just a second. But when it comes to selling your properties, especially like Pete had a listing like this, when it comes to theming your properties to be very like short-term rented out, you've all seen all the other influencers who have these really cool properties. Like Rob Abasolo has some really, really badass themed properties. That Pink Pickle property I'm kind of obsessed with. But when you go to sell, all those things, all that money that you put into making a property really, really themed and fun for short-term rental is not always something that is going to be attractive to buyers. So Pete, you had a $3 million listing that had been really themed and had the murals and had all the things. But at that $3 million price point here, a lot of the feedback that we got from potential buyers who were not necessarily investors, they're just people who want to have a luxury beach house because they've got extra money. Yeah. Their main complaint was that for $3 million, I want class. Yeah. And this is not that. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit, like how overly theming affects your sale price and vice versa.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely played a part on, some people are going to like it. Some people aren't going to. Luckily I ended up selling the property. My buyer also could see right past it. So he's an experienced investor with many short-term rentals. So he saw right past it, but he's in a different category than most buyers. They see, they're like, oh, it plays into the part of like a home buyer. Like I have to change this, I have to change this. But he was able to kind of compartmentalize that because he saw the revenue potential. And so to him, at the end of the day, the bones of the house were excellent. The things that cannot be changed. I always tell my clients, focus on the things that can't be changed. You can't change the location. You can change the square footage, but that comes at a cost. You can't change, the number of bedrooms, typically, all that stuff. So if you have to repaint a wall, it's not the worst thing in the world. Or if you have to rip down this decor, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's much better than having to put in a pool for $100,000. So, but he saw right past it. It kind of went a lot faster than most homes at that price point.
Yeah. And now, Wade, let's switch gears to Orlando because there's a lot of people trying to sell in Orlando right now. And what I've seen is that if you did not do a good job of theming, if you just slapped up a Mickey decal on the wall and the rest of it is, 2005 beige decor, you're not selling. You have to your price point's got to go way down. So I'd love to hear about what the opposite experience is if you're selling to investors as a listing agent in the Orlando market.
Yeah. So Orlando as a whole, inventory has really hit the market. But the one thing that hasn't are themed properties, the ones that are, fully arcaded up. They still have murals and maybe custom beds throughout the entire home. Those are still relatively rare. And the ones that do hit market are still probably peak end of that purchase price that most buyers are probably willing to spend, but they're still much more expensive. What I'm seeing is a ton of sellers, and it's been like this for quite a while, who may have just done stickers like you've mentioned, or they've just done, I'm just getting a notification. Or if they've just done, I would say, very, very light work in terms of themes. Most of those homes are sitting, especially when they're trying to price at the top end of the market, like those homes that have done a very high caliber interior. So it's very difficult to bring to a seller. I would say, hey, we've got this crazy themed up home that you're trying to price around, but your theme isn't as, I would say, aggressive or as luxury as maybe that property. You do need to be able to look and compare to other homes that are probably selling, I would say, just like a regular home at that point. If you're going to be listing your home, which is very simple interior that probably only took a couple weeks to put together, usually those homes are pricing at around the same price point as just a regular home in the market down there.
So listing side is tough right now. And I think the main thing that it comes down to is in any market at any time in the real estate cycle, there is a price for what your property will sell. And if it's not selling, it's usually that. And that can be really hard to come to terms with when you've paid a certain amount for a property or you have emotions wrapped up in it because you worked really hard on it. Just where we are in the market right now is a lower price point to get things sold than we have been in the past. Now, will that change as interest rates tick up? Probably. And it will not be necessarily because of just crazy appreciation. More so, it'll be because of more buyer competition as rates tick down. So definitely something to think about. But a lot of times, it's not that your listing agent, didn't list it hard enough. It's that, the price needs to come down. And if it's not selling and you've done everything and the pictures are good and your agent's picked up the phone and called every agent that has a client in the market and can't get it done, or if you've had, especially guys, if you've had a lot of showings but no offers, it's because they got there, they looked at it, and they decided it wasn't worth the asking. So just keep that in mind. And there are ways to get things sold. We have done a lot of deals this year, but it's just not 2021 anymore. And it's very, very hard when you're selling a property, myself included, to come to terms with that.
Yep.
One thing, bringing it back to that revenue too, revenue does speak for these homes. I have a home that was actually listed for probably close to 6 months that went off market. But revenue from the time that from when it went off market to when we found a buyer for it, spiked exponentially. So the revenue, when we relisted and brought it back to a market, we got the price that we wanted for the seller after the revenue spiked for the home. So just to emphasize how much revenue speaks for when you go to sell, that is the number one thing that most professional investors who are looking in our markets, who are looking to buy an Airbnb, that is the absolute first thing that they're going to look at when they're considering your home.
Yeah. So I have a listing right now, 3-2 on Panama City Beach, that my seller, he almost doubled the revenue from the previous owner, which it was property managed. It was not self-managed. It did like in the 30s, and he took it in the next year to over 50. And that's why I really want to stress to new buyers of short-term rental property, there is not a number that this house is going to do. There's a square footage to the house. There's material facts about the house, but revenue is not a material fact of the house. And so, I also have a listing right now that's a gorgeous, gorgeous, unobstructed Gulf view. I'm going to plug it, 312 Highway 98. But there will never be anything built across the street because the city of Mexico Beach owns that property over there. It's a $1.1 million house for sure, and it did $30,000 or $35,000 last year. I mean, property managed. The decor is Star Wars. And I told them nobody comes to the beach for Star Wars, but a good investor or anybody with a vision like Pete's person could come in and take one look at that property and go, oh my God, 50 feet of unobstructed Gulf view. Yep. This property is a 4-bedroom, 2-bath. I can change the decor. Absolutely. You can't change the location.
Yeah, I think some people, revenue is a guideline, right? If we're looking at what a property has done in the past, especially in these markets where a lot of these properties are property managed, I have to have this conversation with my clients all the time. Like, just because it's currently doing X doesn't mean it's going to always do X. A lot of these property management companies, I'm just going to be honest, they suck. And so if they're doing 40, you could pretty much guarantee that you're going to do better than that. Now, I can't tell you exactly what, because it does, at the end of the day, fall back on you, but you can't look at a property and say, oh, it's only doing 40. That's it.
Yeah. And that goes both ways too. Like,
100%.
If the numbers look completely too good to be true, it's possible that you could do less than what the current owner is doing. We've had a client before who for decades was a revenue manager for hotels, and you're probably not going to do better than somebody with that experience. So that's why it's so important to enemy method and not just use that one teeny tiny data point of the rental history. You need to get data from multiple sources, multiple data sources. So I like Price Labs, AirDNA, Key Data, all that. And then also enemy method, and get many data points and don't just go off of that one data point. But I think, what I'm really hearing everyone say is there is a price that investors are willing to pay for the property in order to make sense for them numbers wise. And there is market value based on sold comps. And those two numbers are not always the same.
And on that note with the revenue, there's a couple of little things. So I think I set the market on price per square foot for a Gulf front sold this year being the toughest year. But a big part of that was really good revenue numbers, and it was a pretty uniquely set up property. If you're having good revenue numbers in a community that has cookie cutter houses that are exactly the same, because I have listings like that too, and there's others that are priced lower, anybody who has pretty good sense can say, hey, this one looks exactly like that one. It's almost exactly the same. So if that one can do that revenue, then I should be able to buy this lower price one and do similar revenue. So it does work with marketability, but to me, that also goes to the uniqueness as well. If you have a unique property with good revenue, you can sell it for maybe a higher price than even the market would normally dictate. And another thing on the revenue side, what's kept me busiest on the buy side is the repeat clients, which makes me feel good because they've achieved so much success, but they don't even ask for numbers. They come back to me, they look at the property. I don't have to send them rental history because they're experienced in this market and they know what they can do with it. And that's important. I can't tell somebody else what they can do with it, but they know what they can. And that makes it really nice, the repeat clients as well.
Jonathan, I'm really glad that you brought that up because I have looked at this in our production numbers at the short-term shop. So across all of our markets, 80% of the sales, the buyer side sales that we have completed this year are from repeat clients. Now, probably an even higher percentage are people who already own short-term rentals, but did not buy their first one with us. So I think that should give you guys who maybe haven't bought yet, like an idea of, okay, well, all the experienced investors are buying right now. Yeah. And that should tell you something that really, like, I would venture to guess that the majority of short-term rental sales in all markets, not just short-term shop agents, have been experienced short-term rental investors too.
Isn't that Warren Buffett who says, be greedy when others are fearful and be fearful when others are greedy?
Yeah. I think it was Warren Buffett. Yeah.
Yeah.
To highlight that point, that the listing that you brought up of mine, the $3 million one, in the first year, she did a great number. And then this kind of goes to show you how revenue can up and down. Then she put it with a local property manager. Don't know why she did. And the number
she got real into syndication and wanted to go down that road.
The number was less than halved.
Ooh.
Yeah, like crazy bad. But my buyer, who's experienced, when I showed him the numbers, it didn't faze him whatsoever. Whereas another inexperienced buyer would have said, oh, what the hell's going on? He did his market research. He looked into the market. He looked at the comps. He did his due diligence. And he said, I don't care what this person did. They effed up, right? And so I'm going to do much better than that, without a doubt. And he knows it. So that didn't even faze him whatsoever. But that just goes to show you that he's experienced and he knows what he's doing. So past performance is no guarantee of future results. And you don't have to be held to that crappy number because someone else didn't know what they were doing.
Well, and property management companies would like to have 25% of something, so they don't care.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. 25% of something is better than 25% of nothing. They're not paying your payment.
Absolutely. You would think that they'd be incentivized to raise your revenue because they're getting a cut of that, but their business model is volume. And so the more properties they bring on, all you buyers listen to this because I have this conversation all the time. Their business model is volume. They really don't care what your revenue is. They know they're getting 20 to 25% of something. And to them, that covers their costs. Your costs, whole different ballgame. They're not really concerned.
I got buttered up this morning from a buyer of mine as well. Ryan, shout out to you. I'll shoot you this podcast. But I got an email this morning saying, hey, Wade, I'm looking at this property here. It looks like it's only doing in the 60s. What's going on with it? Off my experience, it should be doing way higher. And I got the biggest tooth grin on my face. Like, thank you so much for notifying me that you're seeing discrepancies as well, that this home should be performing more. If you ever want to make an agent also work harder for you to find you a deal and you say, hey, I know this should do better. What's going on? we are going to work so much harder for you when we know that you know what it is you're looking for in the market, when you know numbers and everything like that. I absolutely had the biggest grin when we had a conversation. We were shooting ideas back and forth of, hey, this comp over here was doing this and this one here in the same neighborhood of numbers that were more reasonable. And he's a first-time buyer as well. And he came to that conclusion himself. And I just have to say, I love when buyers understand markets and how they can truly perform when you're comparing it to a poor seller or someone who's a poor operator. So hats off to all the buyers that do truly spend the time to understand the markets they're buying in.
Well, and I think that directly the knowledge of the market or the taking the time to understand and learn the market that you're buying in is a direct correlation to how successful you're going to be once you get in there running a property.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's switch to talking about back to the listing side, days on market. So for me, I love as a buyer to see high days on market because I think, well, there's one of two things that'll happen. One, it's somebody that thinks it is a show place and they will not accept one penny less than $1 gazillion because it's the best property that's ever existed in that market. Or the more likely solution or the more likely idea is that they're tired of it sitting on the market. They're ready to get it sold. And you might be able to get a better deal. So that deal that I was talking about that I got earlier, I've been on the market like 221 days. So I love to see a high day on market. But what about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to make it clear to our buyers this is not a primary residence market, right? These properties are investment properties. They own these properties typically, which is the slight only a minority of our clients typically have to sell, right? They typically want to sell for whatever reason the case may be. So if they, or just in the market in general, if they put a property up for sale, I'll be honest, there's a lot of sellers in these markets that are kind of just seeing how it goes, right? If they get their number, they'll sell, or some of them at first are just kind of playing the market. So at the end of the day, if they get their number, they'll sell. If they don't, they'll kind of leave it on, especially if it's in the busy season. Once you get to the shoulder season, I think a lot of sellers in these markets get a little more serious because their revenue is slowed down. Mm-hmm. But they don't typically have to sell. So days on market can be a little deceiving in a market like this as opposed to a primary market.
But 2 years ago, days on market in my market was 15 to 20. And now it's 16.
Oh, totally. Well, rates were 3%. So right. Money was cheap. When money's cheap, every market changes. So it's no longer cheap anymore. So people have to, make sure that they're getting what they need to.
But it is a different conversation to have with a buyer versus a seller because, I do keep up with what is the average days on market. Although it's hard because, like Pete says, the housing market is not the short-term rental market. So when I look at stats, real estate stats, I have to mentally adjust because I'm not in the housing market. And so when I say, I can tell clients, the average home here has sold for 94% of asking, but that might be way more or way less than the average short-term rental property. So we have to adjust for that as well.
Yeah. And to be quite honest, there are some sellers that are still stuck in the 21 mentality where they think they're going to get whatever number they want. And this market has proven to be a dose of reality to them. And I think sometimes it just takes time for them to say, all right, maybe I'm not going to get the number I want. And kind of readjust their expectations. Some might just take it off the market, but I have one listing where my seller is actually willing to take less now as when we listed it several months ago. I'm not going to say the number he's willing to take, obviously, but his expectations have adjusted based on the market and the data that I provided.
That goes back to our beginning conversation too of Avery, you were talking about you offered $100K under a list. You don't know what a seller is going to be willing to accept until you put pen to paper. it only takes a few minutes to come up with an offer, to come up with, hey, you know what, this is probably going to be what works for us. Throw something down, see what happens. Usually you can have a response within 24 hours, and at least it tried. It doesn't take but a little bit of time to throw a number over to them. Again, I would also put it on paper. The verbal offers, I rarely get responses on my verbal offers. When it's, hey, you know, let's see if they'll take 660 and it's a 750K listing. I rarely get responses. You really have to have toured the home, had some sort of conversation back and forth with the agent. I'll usually start with, hey, you know what? We're coming in under list price. You know, we want to prepare you for this. And usually we have some sort of dialogue ahead of time. But I've had multiple situations, again, where you just put pen to paper, you throw it over, and usually you're able to have some sort of dialogue back and forth. And if you find someone who's pressured, you can really secure a real quality property. Maybe that's even had some updates since the seller has bought the home. Buy it for less than what it is they purchased for. So there's a lot of options on market right now. It does not take a lot of time to at least put something on the table.
Absolutely. And listen, an offer is better than no offer.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, at least I always tell people, you know, my clients have said to me, like, well, if I get that number, there's nothing, you know, I need some room to negotiate. I'm like, without an offer, there's nothing to negotiate.
Yeah, I don't think we're in that market too.
Yeah.
We're not in the we need to leave some room to negotiate type of market.
Those days are over.
Yeah.
Buyers have too much information at their fingertips these days. They go to Zillow and they could see all the comps that have sold. Mm-hmm. A lot of buyers are better prepared than a lot of agents, part-time agents especially. So the real estate market has changed drastically at the level of information buyers have at their fingertips.
Yeah, and on that note, that I've been able to get some killer, or my clients have been able to get some killer deals, but usually not on the first offer. Like y'all are saying, I encourage lower offers, reasonable but low. And, you know, usually sometimes the first one works out, but if we keep going down the line on the ones they like and the numbers, the ones that work for the numbers, we typically can find one well under the recently closed comps. And the average days on market here are 130 days. So that's pretty, I mean, that's up like 100% year over year. But, you know, so that's kind of common, but you never know the pain points if they're with a management company that's doing well under market rents and they need to sell, or if they're just like, a lot of my clients are like, hey, let's see if we can get this price. And I'm like, I don't think we can, but we can try.
That happened to me on the one that I was talking about earlier, the 1.55. They turned down 1.7 when they first listed it for 1.9 or whatever it was. They turned down a cash offer. And then the you know, they were just dumb. And then the longer that I didn't have the seller, I had the buyer, but the longer they waited, the more desperate they got. And the sellers were divorcing. And so there was another pressure there for them as well to sell. So we got it for 1.55 when originally it was listed for like 1.9 or something. And at the time that we got it, the list price was like 179 or something like that. So I always ask what offers have you turned down, you know, sometimes they'll tell you, sometimes they won't, but it's interesting to know. But if you're the fifth low offer, then you might be the winner because people are tired of getting low offers. And they're like, fine, we'll just sell it because obviously this is all we're getting. We might as well take it. You know, take it now before the price goes down even further.
And I always like asking the listing agent, what homes did you use to comp this out?
Oh, yeah.
Typically, I never get a response to that question.
No,
and I tell my clients,
so mad.
They just made up the number.
They made it up for sure.
Yeah. So I always ask that question when it's like, you know, when it's out of the ballpark and there's no response ever.
Yeah.
I would have a situation. Oh, sorry, Avery.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Wade. I'm changing the subject. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I had a situation similar to what January just mentioned, but I actually had a buyer who offered on something. Then 2 months later, the seller comes back to me and says, hey, you know what? Are you willing to accept our offer now? And they're like, yep, we're willing to accept it. too bad. My buyers actually got an even better deal on another neighbor of theirs that's less than our original offer to the sellers coming back to me. So what we ended up doing is now my buyer's buying too. So we actually offered less than our original offer when the seller came back to us. And now we have 2 homes that are closing under list price with closing costs in the same neighborhood. So sometimes sellers will also come back to you as well and accept the original lowball offer, or maybe even less than your original lowball offer too.
Well, before we go, while we're talking about good deals, I just want to say that Jonathan has probably one of the best deals I've ever seen in Gulf Shores listed for 1.5. It's a 10-bedroom duplex, 5 beds on each side, 1501 Sandy. And that is a really, really amazing deal that I felt like I should just throw out there because Jonathan's face reminded me of it. Speaking of, and while we're talking about deals. So anyway, that's a really good one.
I agree. Very good one.
All right, guys. So in closing, let's summarize here. So it's been tough to be a seller this year just because of the way the market has been in general, which honestly goes just back to interest rates tripling over the course of 6 months and then staying high for almost 2 years now. Now we're coming towards the end of that. So I think, how fast they go down and how far they go down, who knows? But I think the more they tick down, the more buyers are going to jump back in the market. So I think now, especially at least I would say the next month to the next 3 months. So December 2024 to like March of 2025 is your window. You've heard all of these agents in different markets talk about all the opportunities for good deals out there. And the reason there is no buyer competition right now is because of those interest rates. So if you can find something that makes sense at the rate that they are now, then later when the rates go down, because they will go down. Here's the thing. I don't know when, but they are going to go down. The housing market has absolutely stopped, and that can't go on forever. So it's not if the rates are going to go down, it's when. And when they do, you can refinance and have, it'll be extra cash flow. So don't buy something that doesn't make sense now. Buy something that makes sense at the rate you're able to get it for now, and then you can refinance that later. So it's been tough for sellers, but I think also by the same token of that buyer window of it being the best time for buyers to get deals kind of starting to slowly close, I think that the time to list is kind of coming up. So you want to be out there and listed already on the MLS when that first wave of lower interest rate buyers comes through. You want to be out there at that point. You don't want to wait and then while all the other sellers say, oh, looks like the market's gotten better. And then you have the second wave of more inventory hitting the market. You want to be out there for that first wave of buyers while the inventory is still lower. So if you're thinking about selling, it might be a good time to start thinking about maybe reach out to your agent, talk about what they think they could list it for, and just hang tight. It's okay. People get so worried about, well, I don't want it to be on the market longer than 90 days. Why? Who cares? Yeah. It's okay for it to, 2 years. Okay. That's a problem. There's a problem with the property, but the way the market is right now, sitting on the market for 90 days, nobody's going to go, oh, there's something wrong with that. It's just what the market is now. 6 months is totally normal to be on market. So buyers, I think now's the time to get good deals. Sellers, not necessarily the time to list right this second, but I would start thinking about it as rates start to move down. So in closing, do y'all have any advice for, advice for buyers out there in 2025?
You can't win if you don't play. Come on.
Oh, yep.
I think that's perfect sum up.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for coming on, guys. Thanks for listening, and really interested to interview an economist and hear the actual data of what we're seeing as agents out in the field in the market here in a few hours. So guys, listen up next week for that episode. And thank you guys so much for listening. We will catch you later.